Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webinar, HDI 2018 Research Review and Hot Topics for 2019. Today's webinar is brought to you by HDI 2019 Conference and Expo. There's a link to the website right in the Attachments tab on your Bright Talk window, and there will be lots happening in Orlando from April 7th to 12th, including some pretty big announcements. So make sure that you've registered for that if you're a conference goer, and we'd love to have you come. HDI is where service management and support professionals belong, and speaking of belonging, stay in touch with our community. Lots of ways to do that at Think HDI on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and our conversation forums on connect.thinkhdi.com. And if you're not a community member, you might want to go to our website, which has recently been revamped, and check out community membership. Check it out. It's a new thing. Also, you can listen to our podcast on SoundCloud, on the web, or on your mobile device. I'm Roy Atkinson. I'm the senior writer and analyst at HDI. Many of you know me. Some of you don't. That's okay. I've been intimately involved with HDI for a long time, including working for HDI since 2010. Before that, I had a background in service desk, desktop support, and customer service going back a long way. So it's good to be a part of the organization. So today we're going to cover some of the results from our 2018 research. We do several reports. We're going to concentrate today on the industry reports that we do, where we ask the broad community for their metrics, their results, their current intentions, and then we publish that out to everybody so that you can see it. This has been available to members only for a while, but as I said, check out that community membership. Things are a-changin'. We had 3 reports this year, and I'll be touching on a little bit on all of them, plus some material on enterprise service management from other research that we've done. And here's the agenda for today's webcast. We're going to talk about the general health of the industry. We're going to look at ways that we assess that, support center trends and metrics and technology, frameworks and methodologies that you folks are using, and enterprise service management. I should also tell you that you can download today's slide deck from the attachments. I see that some of you have already done that. Check out the link to the conference site, which is there as well. You can participate in Q&A a little bit later on in the webcast. You can ask questions at any time, and I'll answer them as best I can with the time remaining toward the end of the webcast. There will be one audience poll today, and you can respond by using the Vote tab on the presentation window. Okay? Let's dive in. So let's talk about industry health. How would we assess that? Well, first of all, we have to look at what's going on in the industry regarding hiring. Who's hiring, who's not hiring? Is that growing? Is it diminishing? Is hiring frozen? And also salaries, higher or lower. 2 good assessments of industry health in general. If salaries are going up, that means that people are important and being considered so. If salaries are going down, well, let's take a look at that. So in 2018, these are the stats we had. 25% of the organizations that responded to our survey said that they are expanding. They're actually creating new positions in the support organization. 54% are filling positions as they come open. 19% are frozen, no hiring. And 2% are cutting positions. So only 2% are cutting. And let's compare that to previous year. In 2017, 29% were expanding, so a little bit more expansion. 48% filling, so a little bit less on the filling positions side. 20% frozen, so that's down, but probably within the margin of error. And 3% were cutting. So it's very similar. More people filling positions, fewer people creating positions. But very, very similar across the board. So not a whole lot of change, just a little bit. The good news there, of course, is that support's not going away. All right, let's look at salaries. What's going on with salaries now? Level 1 support, as you can see, has gone down a tiny bit, and level 2 support as well. The rest of the positions that are listed here, desktop support, team leads, support center manager, support center director, those have all gone up in salary. So the ones that have remained more or less the same or gone down a little bit are at level 1 and level 2. Now, I would ask you to think about this a little bit. Remember that this is a large sample, that these are averages or medians across the board. This doesn't indicate that this is what you should be making. It's what people are actually getting paid out in the field. All right? We ask people to give us the real numbers, and this is what we got. And we added some new questions about IT service management this year. And so we haven't got any back stats to compare against, but this is what we found. Process owner or manager, 85,000. ITSM service delivery manager at 94,000, and business relationship manager at about 84,000. So those are new. Next year we'll have some stats to compare that against, and we'll be adding more service management positions as time goes on. As many of you know, we're adding a lot more material content around service management. It's where we're going. Okay, now we're going to look at some serious trends here and some interesting stats about your metrics. So 61% of support organizations saw an increase in ticket volume. So this is another indicator that support is not going anywhere. This has been true now for as many years as I am familiar with this report, which is more years than I've been working here. There have always been a majority of support centers that report that their ticket volume has gone up during the previous year. And that's a pretty interesting stat. Year after year after year, anywhere between 53 and 67% of support centers over the last 10 years have told us that tickets are going up. And I'll talk a little bit more in a couple of minutes about why we call them tickets and not anything else. It's a very interesting conundrum, and I'll have a little bit to say about that. So why is the ticket count going up? Well, good reason. The number of customers that you're serving. That means more stuff coming in, right? Simple as that. That's the number one reason that people said their ticket volume has gone up. New applications and systems, that's also pretty healthy. Number of applications, that's also an indicator of health. I would think that IT is becoming a bigger chunk of the business pie. And as we know, technology is underlying almost every business operation that's going on out there. So we have a scope of services offered, also a good thing. You're offering more services to the organizations you serve, new equipment and devices, and a number of equipment and devices. So all of those have increased, contributing to the increased count in tickets. Now, 14% of organizations, again, that's right in line with what we've seen in previous years. So a decrease in ticket volume. And here's where life gets interesting. Why has the ticket count gone down in this small percentage of organizations? And there's a number one reason, self-help. Users actually have the opportunity to solve their own problems or look up information that helps them solve it. That's the number one thing that helps ticket volume go down. New applications and systems may be functioning better than the old ones. New equipment and devices, again, functioning better than the old ones. So some of these mirror the ones on the increased side, right? New equipment and applications and systems can cause increased ticket count because people aren't familiar with them. Maybe they have more questions or more difficulty using them. Maybe they're not as tried and true as they would be hoped when they go live. But also, new equipment might be more dependable, might be more user-friendly, etc. So what's another reason that the ticket volume has gone down? Well, problem management. That's what it's for, right? It's intended to reduce recurring incidents and change the way that IT works for the organization so that problems get solved before they happen for the end users. Okay? And another reason a ticket has gone down is knowledge base. Just that people can, again, look up information about what's going on with them, what's coming down the road perhaps might be something that you provide through your knowledge base. Here's some applications that we're going to be introducing into the environment, etc. So those are three very interesting reasons why ticket volume goes down. All right, let's move on. The top 10 metrics in support centers overall. So this is what you are tracking out there in the field. The top 10. You track a lot of metrics every month, and but these are the top ones across the board. Average time to resolve. That's a big one, right? That's the speed that you get people back to work. Customer satisfaction, another big one. Abandon rate, and I'll have some more to say on customer satisfaction. Abandon rate. Customer satisfaction with support overall. So the customer satisfaction with ticket resolution, this tends to be more dependent on the interaction with the specific analyst or agent, right? Were you satisfied with this particular ticket resolution? And a lot of that depends on the interaction with the agent or analyst. And in my humble opinion, I think a lot of times it's too dependent on that. What happens if you have a really good interaction with a friendly and knowledgeable analyst who can't solve your problem? Right? That's a tough conundrum. Do I rate the person high? Do I rate them low because I'm still not satisfied? I still don't have a resolution to my problem. It's a tough one. Customer satisfaction with support overall gives a little broader view, and we'll look at the specific stats for that. Average number of tickets resolved per staff member. Boy, is that a problematic metric. That's a really tough one, and I've got a brand new article up on our thinkhdi.com website under Support World, and you might want to take a look at that article. It's all about the variances that happen by industry, by organization size, by the type of industry. Like if you're an engineering firm and each ticket is complex, people are going to be spending a lot more time on it, and your average tickets resolved per staff member is probably going to be lower. So take a look at that. Average speed to answer, average talk time, average handle time. These are all telephone-based metrics, and that's kind of a pretty interesting thing. When you think about it, 40% of your metrics are based on the telephone. And I'm going to look at the way that that stacks up against how tickets get into the support center in just a minute, but that is very heavy dependence on metrics that come out of your telephone system. And I'm going to have a little bit more to say about why that happens and why maybe it shouldn't. But before we go there, I have a question for you. And the question is, does your organization measure and track incidents and requests separately? So I'm going to put that vote in the field right now. Go to your vote tab and put your answer in. Does your organization measure and track incidents and service requests separately? One response is yes, we measure and track incidents and service requests separately. Second one, we distinguish between them, maybe label them separately, but we don't measure them. We don't carry metrics on the individual type of tickets. And then we do not distinguish between incidents and service requests. They're all tickets. We've only got one vote in there, so you might want to go to the vote tab and put in there we go. Now we're getting some responses. That's great. Thank you. And I'm going to let the voting go on for another few seconds, and then I'm going to stop the voting and see what our results look like. Okay, stopping the voting, and let's see what the answers look like as compared to the research that we had. 72% of you said, yes, we measure and track incidents and service requests, or excuse me, 70%. The last couple of votes just came in. We distinguish between them, about 10% of you, and we do not distinguish between incidents and service requests. They're all tickets. That's about 20% of you. So let's look at what we published in our research. According to this, 55% of you measure incidents and requests separately, so that's a little bit lower than this particular group on the webinar today. We distinguish between incidents and service requests. About 21% of you, that's only 10% of this group in the webinar today, and don't distinguish between them is about a quarter, and that's a little bit higher than the group in the webinar today, but that was 20% in the webinar poll today. So not horribly dissimilar, but you folks are a little better off, and that makes it easier for us to talk more about what is going on out there in the field. If we can't tell the difference between incidents and service requests, I mean, when I think about this, I always think of one of the first jobs I ever had, which was working in a supermarket. And to me, an incident is clean up in aisle 5, right? Something broke all over the floor, a jar of beet juice or something like that, and it was a mess. That's an incident. A service request was somebody wants to buy that beach chair that's up on top of the frozen food case, but they can't reach it. Could somebody help them get it down? They need assistance. They need a question answered. They need a service of some kind that you either are offering or might wish to offer. So there's a big difference between those two in the way that we're interacting with the people that we're trying to serve. So if you're not measuring these two things separately, you might want to think about doing that if your tool allows for it. If your tool doesn't allow for that, you might want to consider next time around when you go for a new tool, you want to be able to do that. So then if we look into the organizations that do separate incidents and service requests and track and measure them separately, here's what we find. 55% of support tickets are incidents and about 40% are service requests. So more incidents than service requests. Wouldn't it be nice if that was backwards? Again, incidents, something is broken, it's unplanned, it's an interruption. 40% of you say, yeah, we have service requests in 40% of the cases. So that's a good thing in my book. Service requests, good. Incidents, not so much. I often think about the incident count in your organization as being your IT report card. How often do things break and interrupt the services of the people you're trying to serve? And we also, in some research that we did a little bit earlier on, it's separate research, we found that about 56% of organizations told us that incidents are actually on the rise. And not a terrible surprise, again, because we have more people, more equipment, more dependence on technology, but it should be more dependable as time goes on, one would think, and so far, not so much. So let's move on a little bit here to customer satisfaction. I said I'd have a few things to say about this. So customer or user satisfaction, some of you use the blanket term customers. Some of you differentiate between customers, which is the person who agrees to the service level agreement, as opposed to a user, who's somebody who consumes your services. So customer satisfaction, very little change between last year and this year. What change we actually see is down by about 1%. That's close to the margin of error, but it looks like it's a slight downtrend. Not sure exactly what's driving that. It might be less patience on the part of the users and lack of ability to go faster on the part of support folks, just because you don't have the resources and the equipment and the technology you need to do this stuff faster or in an automated way. You're not there yet. But there it is. It's down just slightly year over year. Well, let's look at customer satisfaction. One of the main ways that you get these numbers is by survey. And a lot of times the survey comes out of your ticketing system, might be built in. Maybe you use HDI's Customer Satisfaction Index service that integrates into your tool. The ticket is marked resolved, or when it closes, it kicks a survey out to the person who opened the case, and they give a rating, and then it comes back, and that's how you develop these metrics. So let's look at surveying a little bit, and something I want you really to be mindful of when you're looking at your customer satisfaction survey. Now, one of the things that we discovered in the course of our research is that about 64% of your general user base ever contacts support. What happens with the other ones? We're not sure. Is their life perfect? Do they go to Google to find solutions? Are they asking friends who they work with and implementing what they said? We're not sure. And that's something you should work on too, getting more people to come to you when they do have a question or an issue. But about 64% will contact support. So they're the ones who are creating the tickets. They're the ones who are, in fact, getting the surveys. So if that's 64%, they get the surveys out, and then about 15%, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, but that 15% is a fairly good response rate for a survey like this. They respond to your survey, and then 85% of those people are the ones who are satisfied. That's really what that 85% means. So think about that. If your user base is 5,000 and we run it through those filters, what we wind up with is 408 people who have said they're satisfied or very satisfied with your service. So it's not really as good an indicator as you might think. It's a small piece of your audience that is saying that they are in fact satisfied with your services. So there might be other ways you can get at this. There might be focus groups you can do. There might be other ways to get an insight into how people are consuming your services and how satisfied they are. And while we're at it, keep those surveys short. 5 questions at the maximum. If you can get away with a smiley face, straight face, frowny face, do it. Just make it really easy for people to take the survey, and don't send them too many surveys in a row because they'll get survey fatigue and they'll bypass you. You know that from getting a survey every time you stay in a hotel, every time you take an airplane flight, every time you buy something from Amazon, every time you do pretty much anything, you're going to get a survey. You get survey fatigue. You don't answer the questions. And so think hard about customer satisfaction. I know that's a really important thing to keep in mind for your work because this is why we do support, right? Keep people going. And if we're not doing a good job of it, we need to know about it. So what are we doing? What kind of devices are we supporting? Well, this is what you told us. 90% of you are, 91%, excuse me, are supporting desktops and laptops. I'm not sure what the other 9% do, but there you go. And you can see there's a broad range of devices and systems that are now being supported. It used to be just the user stuff itself, but now people are carrying multiple devices. In addition, because of consolidation over the past few years, because of the necessity for cost savings within IT, you're doing telecom systems, you're doing online servers, you're doing audio-visual, you're doing all kinds of different devices and systems that you're supporting. It's a huge range, and a lot of you are doing Internet of Things, right? 42% said you're doing Internet of Things devices. That's really interesting. Your networks are getting much more crowded, and a lot of administration might be needed, a lot of assistance getting people to use their devices in the proper ways, chasing security issues on them, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot going on out there, and we know that your staffs are not growing in a fashion that parallels this. Remember, right at the top, we talked about hiring, and there's not that many new positions being created to take care of all these new types of systems and devices, right? So what are the technologies that you need in order to provide successful support? What did you tell us are you've got to have it? These are must-have technologies. Incident management, okay? That makes perfect sense. Look at number 2 there, knowledge management. But if you think about it, we talked about the usefulness of knowledge bases and especially self-help and knocking down the number of contacts to the support center, right? Knocking down the number of tickets. And the organizations that had a decrease in tickets, these were exceedingly important. So knowledge management is number 2 after incident management. Now, another reason why knowledge management has become more important and more talked about over the last couple of years is because of automation, and especially in terms of artificial intelligence. You have to feed these systems information. You have to train them. And in order to train them, you have to at least know where your knowledge is, so you know where to point these systems to absorb the data that's in your organization. So you have to have a certain amount of knowledge management to get that done. But knowledge management is exceedingly important as we go forward, as we begin to automate systems more and more and more. And also, self-help, as we've seen, can be very important to keeping your contact levels within desirable ranges. I don't like to call it call deflection or contact deflection. I think that's a harsh term. Users don't like it for sure. Oh, I'm deflecting you today. Think about it as contact management. This is how we keep the number of contacts that we have to deal with under control. By doing the right thing about self-help and doing the right thing about knowledge management, we can turn things around quickly. We can put more friendly knowledge in the hands of users themselves, let them resolve their own issues. Some of them like to do that. Some of them don't like to do that. They feel that they're being abandoned by support, so don't put that onus on them. Give them an alternative and make it easy for them if they can't find something in self-help, or if they don't want to use self-help, make it easy for them to contact you. But it is exceedingly important that we look at these and see how they're affecting us going forward. So a lot of you have identified implementations and upgrade as some of your biggest concerns. That's one of the top. Every time we ask the question, what are your top concerns within our community, this is one of the big ones. Implementing new technologies comes up right at the top. So why do you want to do this? Well, you told us that to improve the customer experience. And let's talk a teeny bit about customer experience. What does that really mean? How does it differ from customer satisfaction? Well, customer or user experience has to do with every single touch point along the way. Think about you when the first day you came to work. Where did you go? How did you find out about things? How easy was that? How hard was it? What kind of arcane language did you have to learn? What kind of navigation through a website did you have to learn? The easier you make that and the more straightforward you make that based on your customers and your users' feedback, the higher their ratings of your customer experience are going to be. The customer experience is the whole ball of wax. Every touch point throughout their interfacing with the organization. Customer satisfaction usually based on interactions, transactions, and not quite the same thing, okay? A lot of organizations are doing journey mapping now to try to see exactly how your customers move through their relationship with your organization and where it can be improved. And remember that customer journey in terms of your interactions with them as a support organization are part of the whole organization's interactions with them. So it should be consistent. It's user experience and customer experiences are expected to be consistent. They don't have to be exactly the same, but they should be consistent across the board. All right? Continual process improvement, big thing. Making sure that you are being effective and efficient. Business alignment, can't say enough about it. It's a really big, important thing. Are your goals aligned with the overall goals of the organization? And I remember a couple of years ago, I was speaking at the HDI conference, and I was doing a session on metrics, and I asked about alignment of goals, and I said, what does it mean when you're doing a good job and your goals are aligned with the goals of the business? And somebody who was sitting in the front row who worked for a railroad company said, the trains run on time. So that person was able to see how achieving their goals in the support center had a direct effect on the trains running on time. Why? Because the systems were working properly. People were getting back to work quickly. If they got interrupted, they were getting what they needed in terms of service requests, and the trains run on time. So there should be that straight line. Make sure that your goals are aligned, right? Cost, certainly a big factor in looking at system upgrades, et cetera. Compliance requirements getting more important all the time. So many rules, regulations. We just had GDPR. I'm sure that you're aware of that. In terms of user privacy, we have PCI DSS. We have CAN spam. We have lots of rules and regulations about how we gather data, how we protect that from invasion and breaches and so forth. So lots of drive behind compliance requirements in motivating implementations and upgrades. And expand services. Remember, we saw that the scope of services was one of the factors in creating increased ticket volume. So when you increase the scope of services, you might need different tools or better tools in order to get that done. All right, let's move along. Let's look at self-service tools available for end users and customers. This is what you told us that you're using in order to provide that self-help. Well, the knowledge base, yep. And remember, please, that knowledge bases are not just articles, text documents, etc. They can also be composed of videos, audios, recorded webinars like this one. You can do lots of things with a knowledge base that you didn't used to be able to do. You can include all kinds of rich media. Make sure that you do that where it's appropriate. Show people how to do something with a YouTube video or something like it. Lots of things that you can do. Password reset is a fairly common thing for self-service, self-help. FAQs, and there's two kinds of FAQs, frequently asked questions. One of them is the types of questions that are written by staff and thinking that this is what the users are going to talk about and ask about. The other is composed of questions that actually are asked often. And so you might want to think about which kind you want or how you want to start it. Maybe you'll start with some seed questions and then build actual questions that are asked frequently by end users into your FAQs. Incident history. Well, it just allows people to go back and look at what their ticket history has been. If they've had the same issue over and over again, maybe there's an underlying reason. Maybe that's something that has to go to problem management. Maybe it's a new piece of equipment. Who knows? Downloads, documents, patches, upgrades. About 31% of you offered that. Documentation libraries, so people can get the manuals for the software that they're using and be guided through that process. Personal profile updates. A small percentage offers personal profile updates. Well, I would think that that would be an easy thing to build into a system and offer it to end users, allow them to update their own information. A lot of times it takes a substantial amount of time for people to get profile updates when they move in between departments or change teams. Teams becoming exceedingly important now, and you might be on 2 or 3 different teams, and you might be on 5 or 6 different teams in the course of a year. So maybe offering a personal profile update would be a good thing. Self-healing. I'm always a little bit leery about that because, in general, our history with self-healing software hasn't been that great, but that's something that about 7% of you are offering. Self-diagnostics. Well, that might be a good thing. You run some diagnostic tools and at least have an idea of what's going on with your computer or your system before you even contact support, and you can maybe share a report or some feedback from that tool. So this is what's going on in the world of self-service and self-help. And now we talk about the alignment between technology and frameworks or methodologies. And again, top of the heap is still ITIL. And some of you know ITIL 4 is coming very soon. It's just about here, in fact, and there's going to be training and certification involved in that. There's bridge courses going on, etc. ITIL is still the big player. In terms of knowledge management, KCS, Knowledge Centered Service, is the big player. There isn't really a major competing methodology with KCS. And a lot of people swear by KCS, including us here at HDI. It's what we train on. The HDI Support Center Standard, if you're not familiar with that, get familiar with it. It's really a very interesting standard. Talks not about how you should do day-to-day business, but the kinds of things that you need to think about. And it does work very nicely with ITIL. We have an Axelos paper, a little booklet out there that you might be able to get your hands on through the Axelos website that talks about how the HDI Support Center Standard integrates with ITIL, and you can probably take some coaching from that. Lean, Six Sigma, and over here, DevOps, of course. DevOps gets a lot of press these days, especially in terms of the perceived opposition between DevOps and IT service management. I've written about this. I don't think there's opposition. I think they go together very nicely. I think a lot of these frameworks, they're not ideologies. They are meant to be adopted and adapted. They do fit together if you think about them carefully. You can use them in ways that benefit your organization without necessarily having to say, oh, we're an ITIL shop or we're a DevOps shop and we won't use anything from ITIL. That's ridiculous. Or, these arguments that take place about frameworks and methodologies that really don't have to take place at all. So that's the landscape right now. And in terms of the future, here's what you're looking at planning-wise in terms of methodologies and frameworks. Again, you can see that ITIL is the big player in town. 71% of you said that you're currently using it. More of you plan to use. Some of you have used it. Very few haven't used it and don't plan to use. That's the little tiny piece of the bar way out at the right-hand side there. So still the big player in town. Knowledge-centered service, again, is a long bar, and it's really the only knowledge management-related one. And the HDI Support Center Standard, we're thrilled to see this, although we suspect that this stat is not true across the entire universe of support. A lot of folks who take these surveys are in fact HDI members or have been HDI members, and they're familiar with the standard. If you're not, check out our website and get familiar with the standard. It's pretty cool. Lean, Microsoft Operations Framework, Total Quality Management, all of these things, you can see these percentages. And again, you can download the slide deck from the attachments tab on your BrightTalk window. Okay. So here's the change between 2017, 2018. The number, we were surprised to see this. Last year, only 55% of you said that ITIL was your big framework. That's the one that you leaned on. And that was down from previous years. Previous years are closer to what it was this year. That may have been an anomaly. We're not sure exactly why that number went down, but it is back up at 71% this year. KCS went up this year. The HDI Support Center Standard went up this year. Lean went up this year. ISO 20,000, not so much. ISO 9,000, not so much. So we're not sure what's going on there, but that's a trend we're going to be watching into the future. Are the ISO standards maybe not inflating people's balloons as much as they should be? Not sure. Microsoft Operations Framework, which is, still one of the more frequently used ones, was down to a much smaller number this year, and we'll be watching that trend as well. And notice that these bracketed ones are the ones that had the big gains. They're the frameworks that had the big gains this year. So we'll be watching those very closely. And we wanted to say something today about enterprise service management. For those of you who aren't familiar with that term, if there is anybody out there who's not familiar with that term, basically what we're talking about is the use of the principles, practices, and methods of what we've learned over the past, I guess 30 years now of IT service management, and using them in ways that benefit other parts of the organization. A lot of organizations are using the same tools, if it's possible, that are used for service management within IT, now using it outside IT. And you can see here that about a little bit more than a quarter have adopted the idea of enterprise service management, applying these principles outside of IT. About 1/3 are planning to adopt it, and a little over 40% don't have plans to do it. We've been tracking this over a little bit of time, and it is really an increasing trend. It just makes sense. One of the biggest benefits, before I get into this next slide, one of the biggest benefits is that if you have a common data across many business units in your organization, if you're sharing a data pool with other business units, you're able to get a much better 360-degree view of your users and customers, just because you have common access to that tool. So where is it being used? Well, customer service and support, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because the actions that you take in a customer service environment are often very similar to what they are, at least in technical support and IT support. Very similar things. People call up, they have a request, they have an issue. You go through a process, you resolve it, etc. Look at number 2 there, though, human resources. HR, as it turns out, through several bits of research that we've done, is one of the biggest participants in this whole push toward enterprise service management. They want to be able to get at the data pool, create the data pool. In a lot of cases, when somebody comes on board, the first records that get created are happening in HR, which helps IT with its onboarding. What kind of equipment do they require? Where are they going to be? What unit are they going to be in? All of that information. So it makes sense for HR to be on board. Facilities, again, if you have a request or something is broken with facilities, the processes that are gone through are similar to what they are in terms of IT support, trying to find out what services your customers need and want, so that it makes perfect sense. Finance, training, and then other. So HR is the biggest single participant across the board. In this survey, customer service was the biggie, but right behind it, HR. In other surveys that we've done, we've discovered that HR was even bigger than customer service. So make friends with your HR folks if you're not already. Okay? Very interesting stuff. So where is the service management tool going to be used? And again, we see HR is right at the top of the heap. In other words, they want to tap into the same tool that you're using. Right now, they probably have a separate system. They're on Lawson or some other HR management system. They would love to be able to use your service management tool to provide a lot of the services that they're providing. Facilities the same, customer service and support, finance, and training. So you see the same things come up again and again. Human resources, facilities, customer service, finance, and training. Those are the big areas in your organizations that are on board with enterprise service management. And they want to use that tool for a bunch of reasons. But if they can, and again, that user experience is consistent across the board, that is a good thing. So if you expand service management, what is the impact on IT? Well, the number one thing is, of course, that IT winds up supporting the tools for service management across the whole organization. Makes sense, right? You're using it already, chances are, or something very close to it already. Maybe you're adding modules. Maybe you're changing tools that will make it better for you to do enterprise service management. But you're familiar with the tools. You know how they work. You know what you need to get it running and included. You know how maybe it's software as a service. Maybe it's in the cloud. Maybe it's hosted on premises. but you're familiar with the tool, so it makes perfect sense for IT to support it. It's also an IT object, right, if you want to look at it that way. It's something that belongs in IT. IT has played a consulting role in getting this running in organizations, also a pretty high percentage. Now look at this one, recognition of the value provided to business. So that's an excellent opportunity, and we've been saying this since enterprise service management became a thing, is that it's an excellent opportunity for IT to lead, to be the consultant, to provide valuable business partnership to the rest of the organization. Because in general, IT knows what it's doing with regards to service management principles, practices, and tools. And so doesn't it make sense that you'd be able to provide some value to the business by doing this as the business expands its adoption of service management practices? Yeah, it does. And then IT expanded its scope of services. We talked about the scope of services a bit earlier on. And in 40% of organizations, there you go. That's what happened. And then a small percentage of you anyway got additional funding to IT as a result. How cool is that? Additional funding, good, right? Always, that's one of the things everybody in this world is chasing, is to get a little bit more budget and maybe some more resources. Okay, what else? Let's review. So in terms of industry health, expansion has slowed a little bit, but hiring continues. Salaries at level 1, level 2 are flat. Others have gone up. Not sure exactly why level 1 and level 2 are flat, but there you go. Maybe it's because of turnover. That would be my first educated guess. The tenure of people in level 1 and level 2 tends to be shorter, and so the salaries remain similar year to year. Okay, metrics. Volumes continue to increase. The majority of work is incidents. Again, that's not great for the IT report card. Customer service, customer satisfaction is flat, or nearly so, but the scope of services has increased, as we've discussed, across multiple results from our surveys. Incident management, knowledge management, remote control are the top tools. Self-help is important for volume reduction. So if you want to manage your contacts better, get in touch with self-help, self-service. If you're not doing that already, there's lots of good information on our website about getting in step with self-help and how to avoid some of the self-help adoption nightmares that people have experienced. It's pretty common, by the way, when I'm talking about this, that an IT department will invest a tremendous amount of effort in creating a self-help site or whatever, but everything is created from their point of view. They don't use the customer's terminology. They don't make it easy for customers to find what they're looking for. And so customers maybe try it and then don't use it again. It becomes a low adoption rate, and then the IT department abandons all the investment that it's made and walks away from it instead of saying, what did we do wrong? How can we improve it? There's lots of good advice on how to get it done right, and more coming, by the way. We have lots of interest in self-help. It's one of the top subjects that you've expressed interest in for the year, and we're going to be addressing it a lot. Frameworks and methodologies. ITIL is still the big player. KCS is still gaining. Knowledge management, as we said, is key, and lots of discussion around that in terms of preparation for automation and AI. And KCS is a terrific methodology. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. More organizations are using frameworks than previously. So they're using industry-proven ways to get things accomplished, basically is what that means. And that's good. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're adopting from what has been proven over time. It doesn't mean that you do it exactly the same way other organizations do, but you can certainly take a cue from these frameworks and methodologies and do it according to ways that have been proven. Enterprise service management is still growing, and impacts include possibly increasing the value, the perceived value of IT across the organization. So it's something you might want to look into doing if your organization isn't doing it now. Keep that in mind as we go forward. Excuse me. Let me remind you again before we get to questions that the entire slide deck is available for download from the attachments. This webinar is recorded and will be available very quickly after we conclude it, but we're not done yet, so don't run away. We've got some questions coming from you, and we'd like to get to those now. Okay. I suggest adding a reason for staff turnover for relevant roles. Where are the people who are leaving? We actually do have that. If you get the full report, we talk about where people wind up. Are they staying in the organization and moving to a different department? Are they staying within the support organization and moving to a different role? Or are they moving out of the organization entirely, out of the company? So you might want to check out the full report. Again, I highly recommend, if you're an HDI existing member or if you've become a community member, get your hands on our research. There's tons of it. I mean, these reports are lengthy, 80, 90 pages of research results. So do that. But we do talk about that. Ray, technology, frameworks, and methodologies. What was the question asked open-ended, or was it a choice of frameworks, click all that apply? It was a click all that apply, and I think we had a total of about 18 or 20 different frameworks and methodologies. Open comment, very difficult to interpret. So we do go from the previous year's results and carry over ones that have popped up on the radar. We drop those that have dropped off the radar. So it changes slightly from year to year, but it's not an open-ended question. That's a good question to ask. Thank you. What is the difference between talk time and handle time? Okay, well, here's the definition of the metric. Talk time is the actual time that someone is in conversation with the customer. Handle time covers from when the call is picked up to when the after-call work is done. So when I finish making the notes on that call, it's the total time to handle the entire interaction. Talk time is just the time that I spent immediately interacting with the customer. It's usually a little bit shorter. These days, people are getting that handle time down. A lot of organizations, I'm surprised to hear, actually have it down to about 20 to 30 seconds. It used to be 2 minutes, and now it's down to about less than a minute. So that's the difference between talk time and handle time. Actively engaged, talking to the customer versus start to finish. Okay. Okay, we talked about the reason for staff turnover. No more questions? Oh, my goodness. You guys are being easy on me today. Well, that's okay. That's all right. Let me talk a little bit more about what's coming up. We will have another webinar in February, of course, and it is going to be on a Wednesday, February 27th this time, not our traditional Tuesday. Again, I would ask you, if you have a minute, please rate this webinar in terms of your experience with it. Was it what you expected? Give us a star rating, make some comments. However you feel that feedback will help us, because we do work on improving every single time. Our webinars overall are quite highly rated. We're very happy to see that. But make sure that you tell us a little bit about why you rated us the way you did. Lots of you have downloaded the attachments and links. Thank you for your participation today. And if there are no further questions, here we go. What about Verism and IT for IT and TOGAF? Those haven't bumped up on the radar yet. Let me talk a little bit about that. A lot of times, what appears to me anyway, since I have a little bit of a foothold on the other side of the Atlantic, I've spoken in England and have been over there and visited and talked to people from there all the time. Some of the frameworks and methodologies that are bigger in England or Europe haven't caught on over here as yet. A lot of people talking about Verism here, but excuse me, it hasn't hit the radar. So people do have, by the way, let me add this, people do have an opportunity to add something to our list. There is a comment the entire answer to the frameworks and methodologies question is an open comment. They do have the opportunity to add something. So if they were interested in verism and IT for IT or TOGAF, they have the opportunity to add it. So please, when you do take these surveys, and we urge you to do that because the more data we have, the better our interpretations are going to be, right? More information I have to work with when I look at this research, the better off I'm going to be because I get a clearer picture of the industry. So we didn't get anything on the radar about these, but they are certainly out there and worth looking into. If you are interested in looking at upcoming frameworks and methodologies, these are ones you might be interested in. Verism, that's VERISM. IT for IT, the number 4, IT for IT, and TOGAF, TOGAF. If you're not familiar with those, I would suggest that you get familiar. Okay, here's another question. Yay, thank you. How do you see Agile integration rumored in the ITIL 4 update affecting the state of IT service management? Well, the Agile is the hot buzzword for now, right? And across the board, it's not just IT folks who are talking about Agile. And of course, there's two meanings. Agile in the sense of being nimble, the traditional sense of the word itself, being nimble and quick and able to move from one direction to another direction and change prospects and aspects quickly. And then Agile, the methodology, which is a different thing. It's aimed at having an agile response to things, but it's also a pretty strict methodology, and some of you might be familiar with that. These are, from what I hear, and I can't talk more about that, but from what I hear, these are things that are going to be included, and at least a view to them is going to be included in the upcoming revision of ITIL. So watch for that. As I said, it's coming very soon. Again, I can't help but think that it will do IT service management good to be as inclusive as possible in terms of the ways that it thinks about doing things. It's been process-oriented for a long time, and maybe that's not such a good thing. It's good to think about processes. We have to make sure that they make sense and that we're doing them properly and efficiently and effectively, but that's not where our thinking should stop. It should be in terms of how we are getting the work done that needs to be done in order to propel our organization forward and get good business outcomes. So I hope very much that more is included in the forthcoming version of ITIL, which we'll see soon. Thanks very much for your attention today. Today's webinar will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live webcast, and you will get an email reminder that it's available. This webcast is copyright 2019 by UVM. The presentation materials are owned or copyrighted by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers, otherwise known as me, are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of HDI, thanks for your time. Have a great day, and I hope to see you at the February webinar and at the HDI conference in April. Thank you so much.